Good. Hello, boys and girls, courageous men and women of God. We have been studying the life of Elisha and how he and many other people in his stories were courageous. And we continue today in 2 Kings chapter 8. And the woman, remember the woman from Shunem that created a room for Elisha to stay in, and then she had a baby. It was a miracle that she was able to have a baby, and then the little boy died, and Elisha raised him from the dead. Well, this woman from Shunem is part of our story again, and yes, she is one of the courageous ones today. You will see what happens this time. Chapter 8, verse 1. Elisha had told the woman whose son he had brought back to life, "Take your family and move to some other place, for the Lord has called for a famine on Israel that will last for 7 years." So Elisha cares about the Shunem woman. They have obviously continued their relationship together where he's seeing her, and he is warning her that God has told him there's going to be a famine in Israel for 7 years, which is a long time for a country to go without being able to create food. Famine means a lack of food, a lack of being able to grow crops. And so he has told her to take her family and leave and go someplace else for 7 years. Now, do you think that this Shunem woman is going to believe Elisha? Yes, of course she does. She has seen how Elisha knows God, he hears from God, and of course brought her son back to life. So even though it's really scary to actually leave your home and their land and go to a strange country, she chooses to believe. And it takes courage, doesn't it? It takes courage to believe what God says sometimes. So she did. In verse 2, it says, "The woman did as the man of God instructed." When we hear from God, we need to be sure that we obey. Because God has our best in mind. What he is telling us is for our good. So she took her family and settled in the land of the Philistines for 7 years. And after the famine ended, she returned from the land of the Philistines, and she went to see the king about getting her house and land. She left her house and land. So now there could very well be other people living there. Maybe somebody even came in and claimed it. So here's an interesting thing. When we obey God, do you think he's surprised at what may happen as a consequence of it or as a result of our obedience? Yes, God knows what's going to happen. He knew that she would have trouble getting her house and her land. He knew that she was taking a risk of losing everything by leaving those 7 years. But guess what happens? As she's coming in to talk to the king about getting her house and her property back, Gehazi, which was the servant of Elisha, who was there when her son was resurrected from the dead, just happens, quote, happens to be talking to the king and telling the king about this incredible story of Elisha raising this woman's son back to life at the exact moment that she is coming in to make her appeal. Isn't that amazing? That God's timing about things is so perfect sometimes. Some people might call it, isn't that a coincidence? Or isn't that serendipity or whatever? No, that is God setting things up for you. And she is right there at that very moment. The mother of the boy walked in to make her appeal to the king about her house and land. "Look, my lord the king," Gehazi exclaimed, "here is the woman now, and this is her son, the very one Elisha brought back to life." And the king said, "Is this true?" the king asked her. And she told him the story. So guess what the king does? Of course he does. He directs one of his officials to see that everything that she had lost was restored to her, including the value of any crops that had been harvested during her absence. So God wants to provide for us, and he watches over us, and he even gives us abundantly more than what was ours to start with, or what he had given to us to start with. So if you're ever scared to obey God in something that he is telling you to do, remember this woman from Shunem, how she was courageous and obeyed, and then God followed her up. He knew when she was coming back. He knew when she was going to talk to the king, and he obviously led Gehazi to be there and to share that story. And so God was fully in control in taking care of this Shunem woman and her family. All right, guys, be courageous, and remember that being courageous doesn't mean that you're never afraid. It just means that you go ahead and do it anyway. Okay, love you guys. Bye. See you next time.